Frank Gaffney is with the Center for Security Policy, and he joins us now with more. Welcome, Mr. Gaffney.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
What do we know about the suspect at this time?
Not too much. We know that he is a man hailing from Bangladesh originally. He's been in this country, as I understand it, for about 7 years. Evidently, he was motivated to attack innocent Americans in the subway system of New York on the grounds that he was upset about how Israel had responded to Hamas attacks from Gaza, and wanted to evidently act out what it certainly seems to be a jihadist attack to take innocent lives.
This is the second alleged ISIS-inspired plot against New York City in 2 months. What exactly does ISIS-inspired mean?
Well, I think it's a mistake to focus unduly on the Islamic State. I think the problem is much bigger. There's a sort of doctrine that the ISIS, as it's called, shares with any number of other jihadist groups, whether they're the Taliban in Afghanistan or Boko Haram in Africa or Jamaat Islamiyah in Bangladesh, and for that matter, the Muslim Brotherhood. And what they call it is an adherence to Sharia. I think of it, as my colleague Andy McCarthy has coined the phrase, as Sharia supremacism. And what they have in mind, what they explicitly aspire to, is the destruction of all governments that stand against the imposition of Sharia worldwide, including in this country. So in their small way, these jihadist attacks are intended by their perpetrators to advance that cause, to be martyrdom operations, killing as many non-Muslims, and for that matter Muslims, as they can, in order to advance this agenda of imposing Sharia worldwide.
Mr. Gaffney, what can we do to stop the radicalization of Muslims in America?
You have to, first of all, understand what I just said, what the nature of that so-called radicalization process is. The authorities of Islam actually say Sharia is Islam. So to the extent that this is a problem, it is inconsistent with our Constitution. It requires the suppression of our freedoms. It ultimately would destroy our government and republic. It's a problem in its unvarnished form, Sharia is. So the radicalization, as we tend to think of it, is that somehow people who are Muslim have become something different than Muslim. They have become radicalized. Now, I'd be the first to tell you that there are lots of Muslims who do not want any part of Sharia, and I think they can be our natural allies. It's the folks who adhere to what they believe is, and the authorities of Islam say, is the true faith that are the problem. And they're being radicalized, by the way, not just by the internet and not just by popular culture and social media. They're being radicalized by mosques. Sharia adherent mosques, not all of them are, but quite a number of them in this country are, as well as elsewhere around the world. Many of them have been founded and operated by the Muslim Brotherhood, one of the groups I've mentioned. So we have to be clear about the nature of the ideology that we're operating against and how it is operating against us.
New York police say this man was inspired by ISIS. As far as ISIS is concerned, do you think we're seeing more attacks at home because their self-proclaimed caliphate is weakening?
I think partly it is a function of their desire to show that they continue to exist and to be relevant and to be a threat. But I think, again, even if the names change, and they will, almost certainly, with the defeat of their caliphate, the physical control of territory in Iraq and Syria, I think it's quite likely that you will see a new brand come forward. It'll be something other than be Al-Qaeda in the past. It'll be something other than what it's been in the past of the Islamic State. But it will be just another manifestation of this jihadist doctrine of Sharia. And that's what's going to be a problem, I'm afraid, for us elsewhere around the world and here in the United States, unless and until We're clear-eyed about what it is, and we are successful in defeating it.
The fighters in the Middle East are more experienced and sophisticated. How do we protect our nation as they flee their territory and seek targets in the West?
That's a great question. You know, I think what Donald Trump had in mind when he ran for president, and he announced notably, not exclusively, but notably on the 15th of August of last year in Youngstown, Ohio, that he was going to do several things to counter this ideology. And by the way, he used the term Sharia to describe it. He said, we're going to stop importing more jihadists. Those are my terms, not his, but that was the general thrust of it. That ultimately translated into his travel bans, as they've been called, or immigration pauses, as they would be more accurately understood. He also said that we're going to counter the networks that are radicalizing in our communities here in the United States. That would be the Muslim Brotherhood. So there are two things that we can do. One is use a filter, use a screen, an ideological screen, much as we did with communists and Nazis in the past, to try to prevent people who adhere to this totalitarian and ultimately anti-constitutional and dangerous ideology of Sharia from coming into the United States. You know, by some estimates, we brought in 178,000 people from Bangladesh since 2011. We brought in 1.8 million people from 47 Muslim majority countries around the world. I'm not going to tell you that all of those people are Sharia adherent and by definition a problem, but I think a fair number of them are. And we've done nothing to try to filter them out. We have to do that going forward. And the other thing is, I think we have to counter these Muslim Brotherhood mosques and organizations and similar Sharia supremacist operations in this country that are recruiting, indoctrinating, and sending forth jihadists of either the violent kind or what the Brotherhood calls civilization jihad, a kind of subversion, often from within our civil society institutions and governing agencies. Both of them have to be stopped, and we have to be about it right quick.
All right, Frank Gaffney of the Center for Security Policy, thanks so much for joining us, sir.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me.